What happens when a young engineer tries to embarrass the CEO, and the CEO turns out to know the job better than anyone on site? You ever been on a job site so hot it felt like the concrete itself was sweating? That's what it was like that Thursday afternoon in Little Rock, Arkansas. 102 degrees, not a cloud in the sky, just the hum of machinery, the clang of steel, and that dry, sticky heat that makes your shirt glue to your back before lunchtime. On this particular site, the future home of a $120 million civic center, folks were dragging, water coolers were nearly empty, and tempers were already short. Crews were behind schedule. There'd been a last-minute change to the steel framing order. Morale was shot. And into that oven of tension walked Andre Ellison. Now, if you didn't know better, you'd think he was just another exec checking boxes for a photo op. Pressed khakis, company polo, spotless white hard hat. But if you paid close attention, you'd catch something different in his eyes. A sharpness, a quiet focus. The way he scanned the beams, double-checked the tension cables, and squinted at weld points from a distance. Andre wasn't there to shake hands and hand out branded mugs. He'd built his reputation from the ground up, literally. Started off hauling rebar in Jackson, Mississippi, learned welding, concrete, framing, then civil engineering at night school. 10 years later, he wasn't just a CEO. He was the CEO. The one who could catch a mistake with a glance and fix it before anyone else even noticed it was wrong. But not everyone knew that, especially not Blake Thorne. Blake was one of those fresh out of grad school types, shiny hard hat, spotless boots, and a resume that read like a LinkedIn influencer post. Smart? Sure. Ambitious? Definitely. But humble? Not even close. He strutted across the site like he owned it, constantly telling older crew members how to do their jobs, tossing around terms he barely understood. Most folks let it slide. They'd seen 100 Blakes before. Give it 6 months, they figured. He'd either wise up or wash out. But Blake didn't just not know who Andre was. He didn't care. And that's where it all started to go sideways. 2 days behind because someone in a suit keeps playing architect, Blake muttered, loud enough for half the crew to hear as Andre and his team walked by the main rig. Some of the guys chuckled nervously, others looked away. Andre stopped mid-step. "Excuse me?" he said, voice steady, calm. Blake turned around like he was ready to teach a class. "I'm saying, it'd be nice if people who don't work on site stopped making changes from an air-conditioned office. This isn't a spreadsheet. It's steel and concrete. Real work." You could feel the air change. Andre didn't raise his voice. He didn't puff up. He just looked at the young man, then at the senior site manager, and finally at the set of rolled blueprints on the nearby folding table. "Walk with me," Andre said. Blake hesitated, smirking, like this was going to be some kind of power play. He followed. The rest of the crew slowed their movements just enough to keep watching without being obvious. At the table, Andre unrolled the latest structural plans. "You said the changes set us back. Tell me exactly what you're referring to." Blake leaned in, tapped a section of the support columns. "This right here, these brace relocations. Now we've got to re-drill and reposition half the south side. That's 2 full days." Andre nodded slowly. "And you've reviewed the revised specs?" "I skimmed it." Andre turned the page, pointing to a highlighted section. "This change corrects a shear load issue that would have failed under stress testing. The original placement would have caused a buckling effect during high wind scenarios. You see that?" Blake looked. He didn't say anything. "Those changes came from me," Andre added, "after I caught the miscalculation in last week's report, the same one you signed off on." That's when the silence really set in. Blake blinked. The crew stood frozen in place. Even the excavator paused mid-turn, its operator pretending to check a control panel just to watch the scene. But Andre wasn't done. He tapped his tablet, opened a project log, and turned the screen to Blake. "You missed it here, and again here, 3 times. And that's just in the last 10 days. Blake's face flushed. A few of the ironworkers shifted uncomfortably. One of the foremen let out a slow exhale, like he'd been holding his breath. Andre didn't gloat. He didn't shame the man. He just said, "Real work means knowing the details, not assuming the guy in the clean shirt doesn't." But just when it looked like it was over, things took an unexpected turn. Blake didn't say a word at first. He just stared at the screen like it had betrayed him. Around them, the noise of the site didn't come back right away. It stayed eerily still, like everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. You could hear a wrench hit the gravel 30 feet away. That's how quiet it got. Andre, still calm, closed the tablet. "Let's be clear," he said, just loud enough for nearby workers to hear. "I'm not here to embarrass anyone. But when you question people in front of a team like that, you better be sure of two things: your facts and your tone." Blake shook his head slightly, more out of disbelief than anything else. His mouth opened, then closed. You could almost see the wheels turning, pride trying to find a way out. "I was just calling it like I saw it," he finally muttered. Andre tilted his head. "No, you weren't. You were making assumptions, big ones, about someone you don't know." Blake glanced at the crew. No one was backing him. Not the welders, not the survey team, not even his usual buddy over in utilities. They all looked away the moment he made eye contact. That's when Andre turned to Kendra Yates, the head of HR, who'd been shadowing the visit from the moment they walked on site. She was standing near the shade tent, arms crossed, sunglasses hiding whatever reaction she might have had, but she'd been listening the whole time. "You've got the logs?" Andre asked her. Kendra nodded. Logged, time-stamped, and signed by 3 team leads. Blake's eyes flickered. He knew what that meant. "Wait," he started, voice cracking just a little. Andre didn't interrupt. He let Blake speak. "I didn't know those specs were wrong. I was following what I was given. Nobody flagged anything until after." Andre didn't blink. "You signed off on them, and you questioned leadership without verifying the facts, in front of the people you're supposed to help lead. That's not just poor judgment. That's risk." The word risk hit hard, harder than anything else. Because out here, risk wasn't about numbers on a screen. Risk meant steel beams that could collapse, concrete that could crack under pressure, people getting hurt, real hurt. Andre looked him in the eye. "I was where you are once, young, smart, eager to prove I was the smartest in the room, but I learned real quick. Being smart doesn't mean talking louder. It means listening first. This ain't personal," he added, "but it is final." He turned to Kendra. "Mr. Thorne won't be returning to this site. Get him his papers and make sure his final log entries are submitted." And just like that, it was done. No shouting, no arguing, just a clean, clinical removal, delivered right where the insult had landed, in the middle of the crew, in front of the steel, the dust, and the work. Blake stood frozen for a few seconds, like his brain couldn't accept it. Then he laughed, a short, dry, bitter laugh. "Wow. Okay. Guess I really stepped in it, huh?" No one responded. He looked around one last time, maybe hoping for a nod of sympathy. He didn't get one. He walked off, slow and stiff, past the same people he used to boss around like they were beneath him. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't even take off his hard hat. Just disappeared around the edge of the prefab units near the east side of the site. And that was when the real tension broke. You could almost hear the sigh ripple through the team. Some folks went back to tying rebar. Others fired up the crane again. The site wasn't cheerful, but it was clearer, cleaner, and the message was loud without being loud. Respect matters here. But what no one expected was what Andre did next. Andre didn't strut or smirk or look proud of himself. He just stood there for a second, looking out over the site like a man checking the weather. Then he picked up the blueprints Blake had been pointing at and started rolling them back up. "Can we gather up the zone leads for 10 minutes, he said, addressing no one in particular, but everyone heard it. Within a few minutes, about a dozen people were standing near the shade tent. Lead concrete, framing, plumbing, structural safety. They all circled up around Andre like it was a team huddle, not a power meeting. Andre didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You wanted to hear what he had to say. He held up the rolled plans in one hand. "Look, I know these changes threw y'all off," he began, "and I take responsibility for that. I made the call, not to make things harder, but to keep this place standing long after we're gone." A couple of the older guys nodded slightly. That load-bearing shift might have added a couple days, yeah, but without it, this building's long-term stress tolerance would have failed code. I wasn't gonna sign off on something that would eventually put people at risk. Someone in the back murmured, "Wish Blake had brought that up before popping off." Andre heard it, but he didn't take the bait. He just smiled a little. Look, it's not about piling on the kid. Everyone's made bad calls. I know I have. But this job, these kinds of builds, they don't forgive ego. He looked around the circle, locking eyes with the heads of the major teams. I'm not above mistakes. I've poured bad footings. I've misjudged weather windows. Hell, I've had inspections where I had to tear out a whole foundation and eat the cost. A few heads turned at that. CEOs don't usually admit stuff like that. Not in front of the rank and file. But Andre wasn't trying to win points. He was just telling the truth. The only difference between back then and now is I've learned that you either fix it when you catch it, or you pay for it later. Then he stepped back and handed the plans to Juanita Green, the structural lead. Your crew's got the toughest lift on this. You need anything to make the pivot smoother, you tell me directly. No red tape, no waiting 2 weeks for procurement. Juanita raised an eyebrow. Even if I need another crane? Andre smiled. Even if you need another crane, we'll move one from the stadium job down in Texarkana if we have to. That got a few chuckles. Andre clapped his hands together once. All right, back to it. Let's finish strong this week. And watch those brace mounts on the south end. Double check everything. Don't assume. As the leads dispersed, you could feel the shift. It wasn't just that Blake had been put in his place. It was that Andre had done it without flexing, without trash talk, and without acting like he was above anyone else. He'd shown them, right there on the gravel under the sun, that leadership doesn't always look like yelling or posturing. Sometimes it's the guy who listens harder than he speaks, the one who understands the math, the stress points, the weather patterns, but also the people. And just when it seemed like things had settled down, someone spoke up from behind the tool shed. Hey boss, came a voice from behind the tool shed. It was Reggie Fulton, one of the ironworkers who rarely spoke during walkthroughs. Mid-40s, quiet, sharp-eyed, been on job sites longer than some of the junior engineers had been alive. He walked up wiping sweat from his neck with a red rag. Can I say something real quick? Andre turned, gave him a small nod. Course. Reggie looked around, hesitated, then said, I've been on a lot of jobs where the folks in charge act like we're just arms and backs, tools, replaceable. But today, he glanced toward where Blake had disappeared. You handled that different. You respected us without saying it. Appreciate that. Andre offered a firm handshake. Reggie, I've stood where you're standing. I know the work, and I know who keeps these projects standing. That moment stuck. Not because it was some grand speech, but because it was rare. Out here, respect usually came slow, if at all. And the thing was, this wasn't just about Blake anymore. After he was escorted off-site by HR, folks started talking. Did you hear what Andre said? Man showed us his screw-ups like it was nothing. We ain't never had a CEO who knew what a wind shear load even was, let alone call one out before inspection. By the end of the day, the tone across the site had shifted. Guys weren't dragging as much. The foremen were communicating better. Even the temp workers, who usually got barked at, were being given clearer instructions. And fewer attitudes. Something had clicked. Meanwhile, in the site trailer, Blake was sitting across from Kendra, the HR lead, signing off on his final paperwork. His expression was stiff, but there was a crack in the mask now. A little less smug, a little more human. Look, he said, not making eye contact. I know I messed up. I didn't know who he was. Kendra didn't say anything at first. Then she leaned forward slightly. It wasn't about who he was, Blake. It was about how you spoke, how you dismissed someone without knowing the full story. Blake rubbed his jaw, sighed. I thought I was being sharp. I didn't think it'd go this far. Kendra looked at him. Blake, you're smart, but smart without humility turns into arrogance. That's not leadership. That's liability. She slid the last form across the table. You've got potential, but if you want a future in this business, you need to learn that people remember how you talk to them, even more than what you know. Blake signed the paper. He didn't argue, didn't crack another joke. He just nodded slightly, packed his things, and left the trailer quietly. Outside, the sun was starting to dip. Shadows stretched across the job site. The sound of welding torches and heavy equipment picked back up, steady and controlled. Andre stood at the south end, walking the frame lines with Juanita and 2 structural engineers. He pointed, crouched, double-checked a bolt placement. Nothing flashy, just a man doing the work. A few feet away, one of the younger crew members, a 19-year-old apprentice named Tyree Nolan, whispered to another worker, "I didn't even know the boss could talk like that. He sounded more like us than them." And the other guy, a plumber named Dom, just grinned. "That's 'cause he was us. He just ain't forgot it." But it wasn't just the crew that learned something that day. Monday morning rolled in with a cooler breeze, and something about the job site felt different. Folks showed up early, not in a scramble, but with purpose. The lunch tent had more chatter. The welders were double-checking their seams. Tyree, the young apprentice, was out near the scaffold zone helping set up supports without being asked. And Andre, he was already there when the first truck pulled in. No cameras, no press. Just him and a clipboard, walking the east perimeter. Word had spread over the weekend. Not just on site, but all the way up to the regional offices in Dallas and Tulsa. The story of how a CEO stood firm, spoke with respect, and still held the line. It wasn't gossip. It was a lesson. By mid-morning, Andre called for a quick, site-wide stand-down. 15 minutes, just to talk. He climbed up on a flatbed trailer so everyone could see him. Hard hat still on, boots caked in dirt like everybody else's. "I won't keep you all long," he said, hands resting at his sides. "But I want to say something straight up. Not from the company, but from me." Everyone quieted down. Last week could have gone sideways real easy. One voice, one bad tone can throw off a whole crew. I've seen it happen more times than I can count. But that ain't how we operate here. He paused, scanning the crowd. Titles don't matter more than people. What matters is the work, the integrity behind it, and the respect we show while we're doing it. Some folks nodded. Others just stared, listening harder than they thought they would. I don't care if you're on a shovel or setting steel 30 feet up. Everybody here deserves respect. If you see a mistake, call it out. But do it with decency. If you don't understand something, ask. Don't assume. And don't let pride turn you into someone people can't trust. There was a long pause. Then Andre smiled. Not big, just enough to take the edge off. This civic center we're building? One day, kids will graduate here. Grandmothers will vote here. People will gather here after hard days and long weeks. It's got to stand tall and stay strong, just like we do. With that, he stepped off the trailer. No applause, no big reaction. But the message landed. People turned to one another, grabbed their gloves, and got back to it, like always. Except now, there was something heavier underneath the routine. Not a weight, but a meaning. At the water cooler, Tyree whispered to Juanita, "You think they'd ever let me go to engineering school?" Juanita didn't blink. "If you keep working like you have been, you won't need to ask. They'll offer." Across the site, Andre took one last lap, then paused near the old prefab shed, the one where Blake had tried to make his moment. He glanced at the spot, shook his head lightly, and kept walking. See, the thing is, power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just listens, stays steady, and lets your actions do the talking. And when you've really earned it, the kind that sticks, respect ain't optional. It's natural. Life doesn't always give you fair warnings before someone shows you who they really are, but it gives you chances, every single day, to be the kind of person others can trust, follow, and respect. So before you speak up to prove you're right, make sure you're not just loud, but right and ready to lead. If you felt something in this story, if it reminded you of someone, or maybe even yourself, then share it with a friend who needs to hear it. Don't just watch, pass it on.